Of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Lots to get to, lots to talk about today on the big program. The insanity coming out of the Trump White House, more from Mueller. Stormy Daniels back wanting her say. She's not looking for money. She just wants to tell her story. Also, Hope Hicks, I got hacked. I can't say anything. I got hacked. And again, as I've been saying, you understand the Russians hacked everybody. They didn't just go after the DNC. And what I do find interesting is, ironically, the only email that didn't get hacked was Hillary's with the server in the basement. Just kind of saying. But lots of that to get to, lots to talk about. The Mueller. Lots of Mueller news. Lots of Mueller news around a meeting with Erik Prince and a Russian diplomat. If you remember what we were told, it was just a chance meeting, had a beer, talked about oil. It's about long enough for someone to drink a beer and wasn't a big deal. Well, the Washington Post is reporting, well, there's someone else who's saying that it was all set up. And that this was the way that the Trump administration, right at the get-go, wanted that back channel. And again, you look at this stuff and understand, having people go meet with foreign diplomats, I don't think is unusual. I think the lying about it, again, it comes back to, as I've always said, it's always the lie that gets you. This is why when I told my kids, if you do something wrong and someone asks you about it, fess up. Because it's always the cover-up. It's always the lie. It's always what you've done. And look, we know that Trump and the campaign colluded with the Russians. The question is did they do it knowingly, willfully, with malice and forethought, or were they just dupes? I mean, for me, that's the big question. I know a lot of people are going to say, no, they knew. They went into it knowing, and they called for the Russian to hack and all that. And that's maybe true. But at the end of it, I think they're dupes. Every one of these people who were not really all that politically savvy, and they got themselves, and there's part of me that still thinks they don't even know that they've been gotten. And that's the weird thing about all of this. They don't even really get the fact that they've been gotten. And now this back channel, this is interesting to me because there's the statement by Erik Prince. Now, remember who Erik Prince is. He's the brother of Betsy DeVos, who is the education secretary. And I'll tell you, it's one of the scary. And also, he was the head of Blackwater, or after Blackwater, I guess it's just XXI or whatever it is. They were big military contractors, made tons of money in Iraq, actually got thrown out of Iraq for misdeeds. It's ironic to me that they would have gone through Prince, a mercenary, to talk to the Russians. Maybe because they knew he wouldn't talk. He'd be the good soldier. He'd shut up. They got billionaire Betsy on their side, so it was kind of a family affair. The wet dream of having the military-industrial complex married up with public education, so that you can just churn out little GoBots, right there, in the front of their mind. Now there are those who are saying, look, this was a way to set up talks through the back channel to get rid of some of the Russian sanctions that were put on by the Obama administration for what happened in Ukraine. Understand, right now, the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House overwhelmingly passed sanctions on Russia. Donald Trump has not signed it. And when I mean overwhelmingly, I mean overwhelmingly. Like 2 people in the Senate voted against it, and like 3 people in the House voted against it. So out of 535 people, you had 5 who voted against it. That, I think, is, you don't even get that when you try to rename a post office, let alone to do something as major as putting sanctions on a foreign adversary. And yet you have the Trump administration who has refused to sign it. And when you hear stories like this one, you start going, is there there? That old this smoke fire thing, is this the reality? And, all of this stuff that's now starting to come out, we're starting to hear names that we had never heard before. This Nader guy who is, kind of the one who is corroborating some of this stuff. I think, and this is what we're going to talk about over the next couple of days, that this is going to accelerate at a pace that, hold on, it's going to be really hard to keep up. Because this Mueller team has been investigating so much, and in so many different directions, and in Trump's business dealings, in the campaign, in the transition, all the financing for his business, Kushner's businesses, all of this stuff. Because at the end of it, for me, it all plays into the same scenario, which is Trump's wanted to run for president for decades. He's always thrown his name out there and said, I might do it if the time was right. The oligarch class, they want someone like him. And here you are in this position where it's not surprising that the Russian money, the big Russian money, who probably, since we have never seen the tax returns, probably owns him. This idea that, Trump's, got $10 billion, even though, Forbes just said it's like 3.1. I guess he lost almost $500 million last year. How deeply indebted is he to the Russian money? And see, I think all of this plays into this. I think all of this plays into how the strings got pulled and the conversations that were had. I've had people tell me that, when a Russian comes to you and talks to you in a campaign, any qualified person knows that you contact the FBI. Why they didn't do it, I don't know. Why you had Trump from a podium calling on the Russian government to, hey, hack Hillary's emails. We want those emails. It seems convenient, but moreover, it seems like it's something that Trump heard. Something went into the ears, and it usually, like a bad case of food poisoning, came right out his mouth. And then here we are. And he could have made this go away right from the very beginning, but chose to double and triple down. And it's going to be interesting to watch how this plays out. Now, on the other side of this, you have tomorrow's announcement on the tariffs, which, look, I'm in favor of, and I'm glad to hear that potentially they're going to have some waivers for some of our allies so that we don't have this back and forth trade war on some level. But understand that the Chinese are just overproducing steel at such an alarming rate. In fact, as someone told me recently, they're overproducing like 7 to 10 times more than we actually produce. Their margin of disposal of waste is what we produce in this country, and quite easily could corner the world's market. They produce half of the world's steel. And while they'll go, well, it didn't come directly from China to the U.S., it still comes from surrogate countries. Goes through South Korea, goes through other places, Vietnam, goes through other places, and still gets here. And this is one of the areas, and the only area so far, that I have agreed with the Trump administration on, is the fact that we need to protect our steel and aluminum industries. And I know, but Rick, it's going to skyrocket prices, the sky is going to fall, hair is going to be on fire. Nonsense. Take out all of those far extreme and throw those out. This is so small that, look, we just gave $1.5 trillion away. Just $1.5 trillion to the wealth class of this country. This is about $9 billion. That's it. That's what the sky is falling is over. It's incredible to me. But tomorrow, I guess, the official announcement, and we will find out the devil and the details. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I've been asking the question for a while. Why haven't we heard the evangelical communities losing their mind over Trump grabbing her by the you-know-what and Stormy Daniels? Well, maybe we'll find out when we come back. Chris Stroop's going to join us and share some of his thoughts. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that workers at Farah Manufacturing finally ratified its first contract. Workers went on strike in May of 1972, demanding union recognition. Owner Willie Farah had said he'd rather die than have his company go union. It was said that he rode his bicycle through the plant screaming, "Work faster! Work faster!" Management had imposed increasingly unattainable production quotas that bred dangerous working conditions until finally the workers had had enough. The organizing drive to bring the American Clothing Workers of America began in 1969. It spread to 5 plants throughout El Paso, Texas. Workers often met in secret. Though male cutters had initially sought out representation with the ACWA, the workforce was overwhelmingly comprised of Mexican American women. The workers staged a walkout in March of 1972, and many were fired on the spot. By May of that year, the firing of workers at the San Antonio plant for union activity prompted a strike. Declared an unfair labor practice strike, the AFL-CIO began a national boycott campaign of Farah products. The ACWA organized public support and strike relief. Women strikers embarked on a nationwide speaking tour as part of the Justice at Farah Strikers Committee to build the boycott and public support. By early 1974, the NLRB ordered the workers to be reinstated and union organizing to go forward. The contract included wage increases, seniority rights and job security, and grievance procedures. But long-term lessons of the strike proved that the work of organizing could never stop with winning recognition and a first contract. Workers continued to battle for years against quotas, firings, and weak representation in a historically right-to-work state.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Yes, and we're not going to believe the Stormy Daniel lies either, or the grabber by the you-know-what, or go down the list. And it's a long list of women who have come forward and said that the Donald, groped, or you name it. You go down the list of sexual harassment charges. And yet, what's interesting to me, the evangelical community, the religious of the religious, not a peep. And I remember back during the Clinton years, and I guess it's just because I'm old enough to remember that, you had all of the Falwells and you had all of the evangelicals just losing their ever-loving minds. And angry at Hillary Clinton for not, publicly gutting Bill and racing out. And you look at the news today that, according to the New York Times, Trump's lawyer secretly obtained a restraining order against this Stormy Daniels so she could, hush her up. Now, still doing this. And it makes me wonder, where are they now? Which is why I've asked our good friend Chris Stroop to come talk with us. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So, am I the only one who's asking this question? Where's the moral compass of the country? The silent majority, I guess. Where are they now?
No, you're definitely not the only one asking that question. I mean, there have been a few conservative evangelicals themselves asking this question, trying to hold their own accountable, but they certainly are not the majority and not the most prominent. I mean, for the most part, they're nowhere to be found. On this news of Stormy Daniels suing Trump in order to have the freedom to talk about what happened and the restraining order, they're not really commenting. I did find one article on the Christian Broadcasting News website, CBN, which is, of course, Pat Robertson's Christian media empire. Pretty straightforward article in terms of its tone, but the last line is very misleading. It ends with, Daniels had previously denied that the two had an affair, which is, strictly speaking, true, but she said she was coerced into signing that statement. And of course, last month, the New Yorker reported about Trump's affair with Karen McDougal, also consensual, but they also reported on this pattern that Donald Trump has of using legal maneuvers to keep women quiet when he has even consensual affairs.
Yeah, and I like how you put that, affairs, plural, because this isn't the first one, and you got to wonder at what point.
Not even the first one with a porn star.
Well, it is the first time a president has been accused of having relations with a porn star, yes. And I guess it just shows you how far down into the ooze we have gotten.
Yeah, it's really, the hypocrisy is absolutely glaring. And the short answer to the question that you posed just before you had me on, why aren't they up in arms about this, is of course that he's a Republican, so they won't be. I mean, those of us who grew up in the Christian right have been aware, increasingly aware, as we've started to talk to each other more, of patterns of abuse that occur in evangelical communities. There have been a lot of stories of child abuse breaking lately. I think evangelicals are having our Catholic Church moment. Well, I should say, because I used to be one, but I'm definitely not anymore. Evangelicals are having a Catholic Church moment. These abuse scandals are breaking. And they also engage in cover-ups. And from some investigative journalism that I've done into how evangelical colleges have been cracking down and purging more liberal faculty and trying to keep students quiet and that sort of thing, I also know that they use legal maneuvers. Gordon College in Massachusetts was known as a more liberal evangelical college. And in recent years, they started cracking down and enforcing conservative orthodoxy on things like LGBTQ rights and acceptance. They also make use of non-disclosure agreements, that sort of thing. When Cedarville College in Cedarville, Ohio, a Baptist university, simply disbanded its entire philosophy department after some philosophy professors spoke out in favor of the Democratic Party, and then they claimed it was simply about other things in politics. Okay, that's the university's official line, but they used non-disclosure agreements to silence the affected people. And these non-disclosure agreements are tied to severance packages. So, they know that those people, the affected people can't afford not to take those severance packages.
Right. No, I mean, it's, it sounds like something that Walmart would do. What? The unionized? Shut it down. And it's this kind of power that they've been able to accumulate. And I got to be honest, I've always been very fearful of those who preach their religiosity and tell me how wonderful they are. And I've always been very, very, skeptical.
people who wear their moralizing on their sleeves, I think usually there are a lot of things going on with them that are disturbing, under the surface. If you're comfortable with what you believe and you're comfortable with your own ethics and morals, you don't have to do that.
Right. So let me ask you this, because, I look at Trump and I look at this scenario with the evangelical community, and it's a male-dominated community. I don't know if you'll disagree, but that's my view.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So this isn't surprising to me that they wouldn't go after Trump. I am a little surprised that they haven't, really gone after Melania like they did with Hillary, and maybe it's partly because, as you pointed out, they're Republicans. But I'm kind of surprised at that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's basically the same dynamic. They want to throw everything they can at Democrats, who they literally see as on the wrong side in a battle of good versus evil. I mean, this is the level of thinking that they operate in, a very black and white world. It's extremely tribalistic. So, yes, it's a very misogynistic and patriarchal community. But when a woman in that community stays in her place, let's say, then they're not really going to attack her.
That's an excellent point, and it's not one that I had thought of, because Melania is most certainly in her place. You don't see her, you don't hear from her. Rarely does she speak in public, and the occasional swat the hand away, don't put your arm on me. So maybe that could be a signal to that community to go, well, maybe she's not happy. She's going to take care of him when the door is closed.
And the funny thing about these communities, of course, is that women can sometimes have a very prominent public role. Think about Concerned Women for America, founded by Beverly LaHaye, Tim LaHaye's wife, who was famous for, among other things, writing the Left Behind books. Now Penny Nance is in charge of that organization. They're touting their close ties to the Trump administration. They're proud of it.
And what's interesting to me is, I just saw the woman who was the head of the Ronna McDaniel, the head of the RNC, saying that the Republican Party is the party of women, and that they're talking about all of these women's issues. And I'm going, how is it possible, given the guy who's at the head of your party, that you could even with anything close to a straight face say that? We're
living in an America of alternative facts these days.
I mean, no, those aren't even, that's just a flat out lie. I mean, I'm not even going to give you that it's an alternative fact. That's just complete and total bunk.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. It's remarkable, but it's a characteristic of authoritarian communities. The Christian right is authoritarian in its orientation. We're talking about paranoid personalities. We're talking about people who support this government because it's authoritarian and paranoid in the same way that they are, and it has the same kind of persecution complex.
So basically what I'm getting from you is he's right in line with your typical evangelical. He's authoritarian types. And as long as he's packing the court with crazy, as long as he's pursuing to do away with abortion and get those queers back in the closet, he's okay by them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it was somewhat awkward for them. They did have to make some more explanations since he simply cannot maintain public face, Many abusive evangelical leaders, male leaders, who have covered up quite a lot of things, are much better about talking the game correctly in public, right? And Trump is simply not. And talking about repentance and forgiveness in self-serving ways. Trump doesn't do that. So they had to sort of find ways to justify him. Some of them are very defensive about him now, but they've found various ways. And sometimes they just use deflection. I mean, this is what you'll see Franklin Graham do, for example, or Jim Baker, who is somehow on TV again selling food buckets to help you survive the apocalypse. I'm not making this up.
And how's that even possible that he's allowed that? And it's amazing to me that people would give him money knowing that he swindled them before.
Yeah, it's a truly bizarre thing. What is he, 79, 80-year-old Jim Baker on TV now? But they simply say Trump is being attacked by these liberals. They're tarring him with all this fake news. It's horrible. They want to overthrow our government. They want a coup. So they deflect in that way. During the election cycle, many speculated that perhaps, even though Trump wasn't one of them, since he was doing what they wanted, he's being a vessel of God's will anyway. He's being used by God, kind of like King David or Cyrus the Great, the Persian king who allowed the Jews to return and build the second temple. So, they're finding various ways to justify their support for him. Or Jerry Falwell Jr. is kind of more frank about it. We didn't elect a pastor, or Jesus didn't tell Caesar what to do, which is very bizarre, again, looking back at how those who would claim to speak for Jesus were very, very vigorously telling Bill Clinton what to do in the 90s. And I remember that too. I mean, I was in middle school when it all started.
I mean, that's the ironic part of this to me, Chris, is that, these are the exact same people who have completely done an about face. And I would argue, and look, we can have debates on who was worse and who did worse. It's verifiable that Trump has been worse, and in his own words. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. How do you get past that, listening to that tape and going, yeah, that's the guy I want in charge of the country where my daughters are going to have to live. Yeah, that's what I want.
Well, if you're James Dobson, back during the election, you say, well, he's just a baby Christian. He's learning. If you're Jerry Falwell Jr., you say, we didn't elect a pastor. We elected a president. He's pursuing our priorities. He's pursuing our interests. If you're Tony Perkins, you say, we're going to give him a mulligan on that.
Yeah. And because, as you're right, it's all about their agenda. And it seems to me an agenda of hatred. I look at just recently, you came out with this story from Lee University where, members of the LGBT community are being attacked. And it's, you see this stuff going on all across the country. And I don't know if it's that we're just now aware of it and it's always been happening at this pace, or because of Trump, it's actually getting worse.
Well, it ebbs and flows. And we're living through a pretty serious moment of backlash. I published this piece that I did of investigative journalism on crackdowns at evangelical universities a couple of years ago. That, I think, was very much a response to Obergefell, but it's also part of a longer-term pattern. So in many cases, different universities do have different characters, and if they get a new administration in, that can sometimes change things. That happened at Gordon College. But, they're beholden to their donors. They're beholden to their parents, Christian liberal arts schools. And many people told me during the time that I was doing that research that when they were when they were students at places like Asbury University, for example, in the 1990s, it was possible to have a kind of serious discussion of perhaps changing the theology around the LGBT community. And since then, it has become impossible to have that kind of conversation. The more that evangelical leaders feel beleaguered, the more they try to clamp down and control orthodoxy. And I mean, something else that happens is sometimes, professors might go along for years or decades teaching things that aren't exactly in line with that orthodoxy. But if it doesn't blow up into a scandal, nothing happens to them. As soon as it does, they get purged. I mean, this happens to professors who just teach evolution in the biology classroom, for example, in some evangelical colleges. Or it might have to do with LGBTQ affirmation and inclusion, or other aspects of theology where they might differ with orthodoxy. If it becomes a public thing and the donors and the parents are complaining, the administration is going to crack down. In this case with Lee University, I think, I actually talked to Tony Johnson, the affected student, this afternoon. Seems like a great kid. And he, at this point, is very optimistic that the university is going to handle this in a more positive way than we often see in evangelical universities and they have in the past. He was glad, and he was very brave to post about this publicly. And so, what happened was he showed a picture of an anti-gay slur written by someone on his whiteboard, and then next to it was a piece of paper with a Tide Pod taped to the door, on which someone had written, "Do us all a favor," and they were basically saying, the message was, swallow this Tide Pod and commit suicide.
Right.
So he posted that publicly to Facebook, and I talked to somebody who talked to him and helped to amplify this just to get out that this was happening, so that perhaps as a community we could put some pressure on Lee University to respond in a positive way. And according to Tony now, they are. And he also says that compared to many other evangelical universities, this one is moving in a more affirming direction on LGBTQ issues. At least that is his sense of it. It's still in their required lifestyle statement, that there's no acceptance of homosexuality, and sex is only supposed to be in a heteronormative marriage, you know.
So do you think this has to do everything with the fact that, you know, like we're seeing in Florida after the shooting, this social media power that people are having, that this generation is tapping into, the ability to have stories like this just blow up and go viral? And do you think this has a big part of that?
Yeah, I mean, those the Parkland students are doing something really impressive, and social media has changed the dynamic. So with respect to evangelical schools, they wouldn't necessarily all respond in the same way, but they are very image conscious. They are also conscious of who pays their bills, right? The donors and the parents. And so in that case, social media pressure may do less. But nevertheless, I've been working to expose malfeasance and abuse in the evangelical community for a long time now. I think it's important to do, whether we can directly pressure any particular institution in a particular case. But it's nice that, according to Tony, now the administration is taking this very seriously. They're trying to find out who did this, and he thinks that they're going to take serious steps regarding the harassment, which stands in sharp contrast to a young gay man that I talked to a couple of years ago when I did this investigative piece for Religion Dispatches, Jesse Steele, who complained that Gordon College was not taking anti-gay harassment there seriously at all.
Maybe this bringing it to light will help. I got to be honest with you. I don't know why you would go to a place like that to begin with, but that's just me.
I mean, you know, I'm an ex-evangelical for some reasons, but and I don't want to misrepresent things, and I don't want to put words in Tony's mouth. And he is, you know, a pious, strong Christian young man, and he believes that evangelicals can change generationally in this regard. And I am very pessimistic, but, you know, I think we should all honor what he's done here, being willing to speak out about this. And I was glad that I could be a part of helping it to get more public attention.
Yeah, good on him. And I hope people will check out your piece. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com so people can take a look at that. Chris, I appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts and helping us understand why it is that, well, we're not hearing the crazy right going crazy over Trump and his dalliances.
What are you going to do? But thanks, Rick. It's always great to join you.
Another day. Thanks so much. Our good friend, Chris Stroop. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this.
Rick Smith Show.
From your cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud.
Yes, there is power in a union. And we're seeing that. We are seeing that living out right before us. In fact, West Virginia, yes, West Virginia, the teachers are back in the classroom after a victorious 9-day strike that shut down the entire state school system. All 55 counties, all the schools, 20,000 teachers in the streets. And last night we spoke with Larry Cagle about the potential of another statewide strike in a place like Oklahoma, where teachers want decent pay and they want a say in what's going on. And as we speak right now, the graduate employees at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, they are on the picket line, day 10 of their strike. Their contract expired back on August 15th. They worked 195 days without a contract before saying, you know what, enough. And here to talk a little bit about the latest news and developments, I've asked Gus Wood to come talk with us. Gus is co-president of the Graduate Employees Organization there at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Gus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this awesome show.
So, you know, I look at this and I got to be honest, didn't hear about the strike that you guys were on because all the air was in West Virginia.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
But here you are. I mean, this is, after 195 days without a contract, your members have said enough to the picket line. Tell me how things are going.
Oh, things are going amazing right now, Rick. I'm telling you, like, we were expecting to hold the lines and be solid because our membership, the organizing model that we imposed a few years ago was already very good. But the level of growth that each day has so far in our strike, I mean, we have exceeded expectations. Every day our picket lines are growing. 20 or 30 more strikers are emailing us saying, hey, we're withholding our labor. I mean, so the support is growing each day at this point. I mean, I'm just like, I cannot believe how powerful the morale is, the energy is. I mean, we were just out in the snow yesterday, and I mean, it was freezing cold, but that seemed to strengthen the picket lines because the noise got louder, and we got more complaints from the university, because we were shutting everything down. And so there's something about this moment right now that has the workers legitimately united and disruptive as possible. I mean, the stakes are that high right now, and it's led to a growth of the movement. It has literally turned into a movement for access to higher education. It went from just a simple contract negotiation to a strike for preserving and advancing the access to higher education. So that's where we are.
No, I mean, it's an incredible place to be because, look, I mean, I've been saying for a long time, there's going to be a tipping point where people who have been getting dumped on for years and years finally have say enough already. And I look at, graduate employees as being one of those groups that have been used and abused over the years. And I look at, in universities across this country, the over and misuse of adjunct professors. All of this stuff comes to a point to where you just go, you know what? No more.
Of course. Historically, as you've seen since the late 1970s, the ruling class has systematically reduced and attempted to delegitimize education, public education, and they're targeting most recently higher education. I mean, since 1978, tuition at colleges and universities has gone up over 1,000%. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous. Like, and nobody is, and the ruling class puts these policies and practices in place in the political economy that allows them to basically decriminalize this type of behavior to the point to where people are just putting on so much debt. They're putting in policies to remove tenure lines at multiple universities. And now with our situation at our university, trying to make graduate workers who become TAs and who do TA work, assistant work, to pay them as hourlies and make them pay their own tuition that is at least $30,000 per person per year. And again, this is the model that others are looking at right now to see if it works here, then they can do it there, which is why they know that they're not going to break us and why we're standing strong. We know that we're higher education on our backs for this strike.
Well,
so
that's a ton of pressure on your members. If you lose here, that this spreads like wildfire all across the country, and graduate assistants and folks all across in universities all across this country are going to be saddled with a horrible policy. One that's an awesome responsibility, but two, it's got to be exciting to be in this fight that you're going to be the place where you hold the line.
That's right. I mean, it's exciting, and we were very clear with our members from the get-go, which is why I think they rose to the occasion, right? Our strike authorization vote last semester was 93%. I mean, it's the highest strike authorization vote that our union has ever had, and we are a very militant union. We've gone on